It happened on a Tuesday evening, just as the sun dipped behind the ridge and painted the clouds with a fiery amber glow. The town of Bridger Hollow had already begun to settle down, shops dimming their lights, diners flipping chairs on tables, and the narrow streets taking on that hushed, sleepy stillness small towns know too well. But out by the edge of Route 17, just before the land opened up into farms and rust-colored hills, a sleek silver coupe hissed and coughed its last breath before rolling to a steaming halt. A girl climbed out, no older than 25. Long, black coat, designer boots, dusted now from the gravel shoulder. She stood there for a second, staring at the hood like it had personally betrayed her. Then, pulling her phone from her coat, she began to tap at the screen until she remembered. No signal. Not out here. She sighed. Down the road, Cal Bennett was locking the side door of his garage. His shop was modest, just one repair bay, a rust-streaked sign with peeling letters that read Bennett Auto and Salvage, and a gravel lot littered with half-disassembled trucks. He scratched the back of his neck with a greasy hand and took one last sip from a warm root beer before tossing the bottle into the nearby bin. That's when he noticed her, just a silhouette against the setting. Sun at first. He squinted, then saw the steam rising from the car's hood. Something about the way she stood, hands on her hips, head tilted, made her seem out of place here, like a cut scene from a movie spliced into the middle of his real life. Curiosity tugged at him. He grabbed a rag from his pocket, wiped off his hands, and crossed the road. "Evening," he called gently, not wanting to startle her. She turned, eyes sharp but not unfriendly. "Hey, car's dead. No signal either." Cal nodded, already crouching down to look under the chassis. "Looks like she overheated. You mind if I take a quick look?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Be my guest." Her voice was smooth, low, not the chirpy, entitled sound he half expected from someone driving a car that cost more than his entire property. That alone softened something in him. "So, what brings you through Bridger Hollow?" he asked, popping the hood. "Just passing through," she replied. "Little detour, not exactly by choice." The engine was still hissing, a belt visibly cracked. Cal clicked his tongue. "She's a beauty, but she's not built for country roads." The girl leaned in beside him, arms folded. "I didn't think I'd need a tractor to drive through Tennessee." He chuckled. "Well, you might be right about that." She smiled for the first time, faint but real. The sun dipped lower, and shadows stretched long across the lot. For a moment, there was just the sound of crickets and metal cooling. Cal glanced at her again. Something about her posture, confident but calm, didn't match the stranded damsel routine. Her coat was tailored, boots spotless despite the dust. He wasn't sure who she was or what her story might be, but he knew she wasn't here on accident. Still, it wasn't his business. Not yet. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and the time you're watching this in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories reach. Back at the roadside, Cal grabbed a wrench from the bed of his truck and leaned into the engine. "I might be able to patch her up enough to get you moving again," he offered. Her brow lifted. "Seriously? You're not gonna tow me or call it a night?" "Nah, don't like the idea of anyone being stuck out here in the dark." A pause. Then, quieter, "That's nice of you." Cal didn't answer. He just kept working. Somewhere deep inside, something had shifted. He didn't know her name beyond Kate, didn't know what she was running from or heading toward, but he knew this was more than just a car repair, and she knew it too. Cal stood in the golden haze of twilight, half buried under the hood of a machine that didn't belong in his world. The engine was a marvel, sleek, efficient, and definitely foreign in more ways than one. He'd only seen one or two like it, mostly in car magazines that littered the waiting room of his shop, pages curled from humidity. Yet here it was, gleaming, like a spaceship amid rusted pickup parts and oil drums. Kate watched him silently, arms crossed, back against the fender. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes flicked often to his hands, as though measuring more than just his skill. Cal straightened and wiped his palms on his jeans. You're lucky the damage isn't worse. The belt's cracked and the coolant's bone dry. Might have saved the engine by pulling over when you did. Lucky, she repeated dryly. Right. She pulled a water bottle from her purse, took a sip, then offered it to him. He took it without hesitation, drank, and handed it back with a nod of thanks. You from around here? She asked. Born and raised, he said, turning to grab a flashlight from his truck. This shop was my dad's before me. He passed 5 years back. I stuck around. You ever think about leaving? Her voice was almost too casual. All the time, he said without looking at her. But this place, it's like gravity, hard to escape. People need you, even when they don't say it. When he turned back, her gaze lingered on him a beat too long. Then she glanced down, brushing non-existent lint off her coat. She hadn't given him her last name, and that wasn't lost on Cal. But he wasn't the type to pry. She'd tell him what she wanted to tell him, and in this town, people respected the space between questions. He clicked on the flashlight and ducked under the hood again. The smell of hot rubber and faint perfume mixed in the cool air. There was something calming about the rhythm of his work. Tools clicking, parts shifting, muscle memory taking over. You're not like the others, she said suddenly. Cal blinked, still inside the engine. The others? Mechanics, town folks, strangers in general. He chuckled softly. That good or bad? Good, she said after a pause. You're straightforward, honest, that's rare. He pulled himself out from under the hood and leaned against the car. I don't see the point in playing games, not in this line of work. Kate tilted her head. What if someone offered you 10 grand to pretend the car needed more repairs? Cal raised an eyebrow. Is that a trick question? Just hypothetical. I'd say no, he replied flatly. Don't care how much money it is. I sleep better knowing I did the right thing. My dad used to say honesty's the one thing you can't buy back once it's gone. She stared at him like she was cataloging each word. Then she looked away. Expression shuttered again. Not many people think like that. Cal reached into the engine and loosened a clamp. Well, maybe I'm stupid. Or maybe you're the smartest man I've met all year. The words lingered in the air. Not flirty, exactly. More like something heavier, more intentional. He looked up at her again, but she was already walking around the car, peering at the other side like it might reveal some secret. The moment passed. Car needs a new belt, he said finally. I don't have the exact type, but I've got one from an older BMW that'll hold till you reach the next city. Won't cost you much. She opened her purse and pulled out a thick wad of cash. She peeled off 3 crisp hundreds and held them out. Cal frowned. That's way too much. Call it a thank you. For staying late, for not lying, he stepped back. I charge fare, 60 for the belt, 30 for labor. She hesitated. You sure? Positive. I'm not here to drain wallets, just to keep people moving. She smiled again. This time, it reached her eyes. She tucked the rest of the money away and handed him the exact amount. The sun had fully set now, casting long shadows over the lot. The only light came from the overhead lamp buzzing on the side of his garage and the glow of the flashlight resting on the engine block. You want to come inside while I swap the belt? He asked. It'll take about 20 minutes. She looked toward the shop, then back at him. Only if there's coffee, he grinned. You're in luck. It's terrible, but it's hot. Inside, the garage, the air smelled of old oil and pine-scented air fresheners. A small counter with mismatched stools sat by the wall, and a stained coffee pot gurgled lazily on a hot plate. Kate perched on the edge of a stool, glancing at the faded photos on the corkboard behind him. Cal as a teenager with his dad, smiling in front of an old muscle car. A dog in some of the photos. A woman, probably his mother. He handed her a chipped mug and sat across from her. "Why do I get the feeling you're not just some girl driving through?" he asked, voice calm but curious. Kate met his eyes, then blew on the coffee. "Because you're not just some mechanic." They didn't say anything else for a while, but something unspoken flickered between them, an understanding that neither of them would admit just yet. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the branches and whistling through the broken fence by the lot. Cal stood eventually and got back to work, and Kate stayed seated, sipping bad coffee and watching a man she didn't expect to like this much fix her car like it was the most normal thing in the world. The shop had grown quiet, except for the soft rattle of tools and the occasional mutter from Cal as he worked beneath the lifted hood. Outside, the sky had deepened to indigo, and stars began poking through like pinholes in velvet. The crickets had taken up their nightly song, and inside, the silence between Cal and Kate felt comfortable. Kate leaned forward on the stool, cupping the warm mug between her hands. It had been a long time since she'd felt anonymous. Most people knew her before she opened her mouth. Her face in some business journal, her last name whispered like it was sacred or toxic, depending on who you asked. But here, in a garage that smelled of motor oil and old leather, she was just a girl with a broken car and a mechanic who didn't treat her like a transaction. "How long have you been doing this?" she asked softly. Cal didn't look up. "Since I could hold a wrench, but full-time, about 6 years now." "And you like it?" He paused, wiped sweat from his brow. "Some days. Others, I dream about flipping the sign to closed and never opening again." Kate tilted her head. "Then why stay?" He emerged from under the hood, holding the old frayed belt in one hand. "Because folks in this town don't have anyone else. And even if I wanted to go, I don't know what I'd be running toward." He tossed the belt into a scrap bin and reached for the replacement. Kate studied him, his calloused fingers, the smudge of oil on his cheek, the quiet steadiness in how he moved. He wasn't trying to impress her. In fact, he barely seemed to register that she might be impressed at all. That, in itself, was the most startling part. "I think you could do a lot more," she said after a beat. Cal chuckled. "That right?" "You're smart, good with people, honest." He gave her a sideways glance. "Those qualities don't exactly buy you beachfront property." She smiled, but there was something wistful behind it. "Maybe not, but they should." Silence again, then, "So what about you?" he asked, tightening a bolt. "You always take detours through dead towns or just having a bad day?" Kate hesitated. "I needed to be off-grid for a minute. Think." "That's so?" "Yeah. When you're surrounded by noise all the time, it's hard to hear yourself think." Cal didn't press. He just nodded, as if that answer was good enough. And for some reason, that made her want to say more. "My family's complicated," she said finally. "Pressure, expectations, people always watching, waiting to twist what you say. You make one mistake, and it ends up on a blog before you can fix it. You famous or something?" she smirked. "Not me exactly, but my name opens doors and closes a few too." That piqued his curiosity, but Cal only grunted in acknowledgement. "Sounds exhausting." "It is." "Then why stay in it?" Kate looked down at the mug, turning it in her hands. "Because if I don't, someone else will. Someone worse. I can't trust half the people around me, but I can't walk away either." Cal mulled that over in silence. "That's a heavy way to live." She looked up at him. "Yeah, it is." He slid the wrench back into the toolbox and shut the hood. "Good news is she's patched. Won't win any races, but she'll get you where you need to go." Kate stood, setting the mug aside. "You're sure?" He nodded. "Positive. You're free to hit the road again. But if you ask me," he gave her a measured look. Maybe you don't want to yet. That hit deeper than she expected. Her throat tightened. Maybe I don't. Cal offered her a kind smile, soft, not pitying. Then stay, just for a bit. I've got an old radio, 2 lawn chairs, and a cooler out back. Not much, but the stars here are real. Can't fake those. Kate blinked. Something warm bloomed in her chest. You're serious? Why not? You're already here. Outside, beyond the back of the garage, the night opened wide. Gravel gave way to tall grass and rustling trees, and the hum of distant frogs joined the crickets in harmony. Cal pulled open a side gate, revealing a little patch of quiet, 2 folding chairs, a weathered cooler, and an old radio perched on a milk crate. They sat side by side in silence for a while, sipping from glass bottles of soda Cal pulled from the ice. The stars glittered above, no city lights to drown them out. The air smelled of pine and diesel, and something about the stillness seemed sacred. Do you always offer strangers a seat under the stars? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Only the ones who look like they need it, Cal replied. Kate let her head fall back, eyes scanning the heavens. I forgot what quiet sounded like. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence between them was full of understanding. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "What if I told you I was testing you?" Cal raised an eyebrow. Testing me? Seeing. If you'd take advantage of me, overcharge me, treat me different, he thought for a moment. Wouldn't change a thing. I fix cars. Doesn't matter who's behind the wheel. She looked over at him, eyes reflecting starlight. Not even if I were rich? Nope. Not even if I were really rich? Cal laughed, low and genuine. Doesn't matter. Rich folks drive just like anyone else. Their engines brake the same way. Kate smiled and leaned back in the chair, heart unexpectedly light. He didn't know. He really didn't know. And that made all the difference. The night wore on like a warm blanket, cradling them both in its quiet embrace. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then fell silent. The stars above were impossibly clear, almost too bright to be real, like someone had brushed dust off the sky just for them. Kate shifted slightly in the lawn chair, fingers brushing the label of her soda bottle, the condensation making her skin prickle. She glanced sideways. Cal was sitting with one ankle crossed over his knee, gazing up at the stars with the ease of someone who didn't have to be anywhere else. His silhouette was outlined in silver blue light, and the line of his jaw twitched ever so slightly when he was thinking. She noticed things like that, tells, body language. It came with the life she lived, one where reading a room could mean the difference between survival and scandal. But Cal didn't give anything away that wasn't meant to be shared. He took another sip of his drink and let out a quiet breath. Funny how many people go their whole lives without ever really looking at the sky, he said. Kate smiled faintly. It's easy to miss when the world's always pulling your eyes down. He turned to her. You talk like someone who's been pulled in 100 directions. I have, she said, voice soft, and pushed and watched and weighed. Cal didn't reply right away. He just nodded, as if he knew the feeling in a different shape. I don't know what your world looks like, he said, but I can tell it's heavier than most. Kate stared up at the sky again. It is. Then maybe you need a night, like this, more than you think. She didn't answer, but the way she leaned back in her chair said everything. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The air was cool now, almost crisp, and a breeze rustled the grass beside them. Cal's radio fizzed with a low AM station playing a song that sounded like it was born from another era. Kate felt herself exhale in a way she hadn't in weeks, maybe months. No interviews, no shareholder calls, no press briefings, no carefully tailored clothes. Just the hum of crickets and a man who fixed her car without once asking for anything. More than what was fair. Can I tell you something weird? She asked suddenly. Cal glanced over, curious. Sure. I haven't sat still like this in, I don't even know, years, maybe. You seem good at it. I had to relearn. He smiled. Well, you're passing. She laughed, really laughed, and the sound caught her off guard. Her hand came up instinctively to her mouth, like it was something she wasn't used to, hearing from herself. Cal watched her, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. So, what are you really doing out here, Kate? She hesitated. I mean, you don't have to tell me, he added quickly, sensing her retreat. But I get the feeling your detour wasn't just about car trouble. She looked down, her thumb now tracing circles on the glass bottle. I guess I needed to remember what real looked like. I needed to remember that not everyone wants something from me. And have you? He asked gently. She met his eyes. I think I just did. A beat of silence passed, deeper than before. Then she stood, brushing grass from her coat. I should probably hit the road. I've already taken more of your time than I should have. You haven't, Cal said, standing as well. But still, he walked with her back toward the shop. The lights from the building cast long shadows as they approached her car. Cal popped the hood once more, checked the tension on the new belt, then lowered it with a satisfying thud. She's ready, he said. Kate opened the driver's side door, then paused. Can I ask you something? Anything. If I came back through here someday, would you still be here? Callie tilted his head slightly. I don't plan on going anywhere. She smiled, half sad, half hopeful. Good, because I might. She slid into the seat and started the engine. It purred to life, smooth and confident again. Cal stepped back, arms crossed, watching her like he wasn't quite ready to let the moment pass. She rolled the window down. Thank you, Cal. He nodded once. Drive safe, Kate. And with that, she pulled away, the car's headlights cutting through the night. Cal stood in the driveway until her taillights vanished beyond the bend. But what he didn't see, what he couldn't have seen, was how she pulled over half a mile down the road, just for a minute, just to breathe, and just to cry. Not because she was sad, but because for the first time in what felt like forever, someone had seen her without any of the weight she carried, and they hadn't asked her to carry his in return. The next morning, Cal was back in the shop before sunrise, wiping down the counters and sorting bolts into mismatched jars like he always did. The rhythm of it was comforting, order in a world that rarely offered it. But he moved slower than usual, distracted, his mind looping back to the night before. He could still hear her laugh. Kate had left something behind, though not anything physical. It lingered in the air, like the echo of perfume or a dream you only half remember. He didn't know who she really was, still didn't. But her words, the heaviness in her voice, the way she had looked up at the stars like they were the only honest thing she'd seen in years, that stuck with him, and somehow that meant something. The garage opened at 8 sharp, just like always. By 9, he had a small line of regulars. Mrs. Halprin's Buick, making a weird knocking noise again. Tommy Bell's pickup in need of a brake pad change. Cal did what he always did, worked with his head down, his hands steady, his eyes sharp. But all the while, a quiet itch settled behind his ribs. Around lunchtime, just as he was rinsing grease from his arms, a sleek black SUV pulled into the lot. It was the kind of car that didn't belong in their town. Polished to a mirror shine, windows tinted, tires spotless. The door opened, and out stepped a man in a tailored navy suit and expensive sunglasses. Cal watched from the doorway, instantly on edge. The man approached with a calm confidence, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. You must be Cal. Cal nodded slowly. That's me. I'm looking for someone. She might have passed through here last night. Brown hair, designer coat, driving an older Mercedes. Cal felt something shift in his chest. Might have been. Don't see a lot of folks this time of year. The man reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a photo. Kate, smiling, standing beside a conference stage emblazoned with the logo of a massive tech conglomerate. "This woman," the man said, holding the photo up. "She's extremely important to my employer. She went off-grid yesterday afternoon. Last known location pinged just outside town." Cal kept his face neutral. "Can't say I've seen her." The man tilted his head, studying him. "You sure?" "I see a lot of people. Doesn't mean I ask where they're headed." A pause. Then the man slipped the photo back into his pocket. "Well, if you do see her, let us know." He handed Cal a business card, white, embossed, minimal, and turned back to the SUV without another word. Cal watched him go, jaw tight, chest buzzing with a strange combination of anger and unease. Who was she, really? He went back inside and set the card on the counter. No company name, just a phone number and a name printed in tiny type. J. Harlan. Cal stared at it for a moment, then reached into the drawer and shut it inside. The rest of the day dragged. He moved on instinct, tightening, replacing, checking, but his mind was elsewhere. The memory of Kate's voice kept threading through his thoughts. What if I told you I was testing you? He hadn't believed her, not really. It had felt like a joke at the time, or maybe just a curious hypothetical. But now it didn't feel hypothetical at all. That night, after locking up, Cal pulled out an old laptop from beneath the counter. It was dusty and slow, but it worked. He opened a browser and typed her name, not Kate, but the full name he'd seen on the photo, Catherine Bellmere. The search results exploded across the screen. Billionaire heiress, co-founder of Bellmere Ventures, tech innovator, media darling, boardroom ice queen. Countless articles, all stuffed with the same recycled phrases and glossy magazine shots. She didn't just come from money, she was money. Legacy money, power money. And there she was, in every picture, sharp and poised, wrapped in fabrics he couldn't pronounce, surrounded by people who probably called him the Help without a second thought. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. That's who had been sitting in his lawn chair last night, drinking soda, laughing under the stars. He didn't know whether to feel duped, proud, or just plain stunned. But mostly, he felt unsettled. She'd tested him, or maybe she hadn't. Maybe she just wanted to disappear for a while. Either way, she hadn't told him, and that meant something too. The next morning, the shop was quiet again. Too quiet. Around 10, a courier truck pulled up. A young man in a blue cap stepped out holding a square box and a clipboard. "Delivery for Cal," he said. "I didn't order anything." The guy shrugged. "It's paid for. Got a note with it." He handed Cal the box, then turned back to the truck. Without waiting for a signature, Cal carried it inside, heart thudding. The box was heavy, sturdy cardboard taped clean at the seams. He set it on the counter and carefully opened the lid. Inside, wrapped in black velvet, was a set of tools, wrenches, ratchets, and sockets, all engraved with his initials. Top-tier craftsmanship, the kind of set no small-town mechanic could justify buying, and resting on top was a folded card. He picked it up and read the neat handwriting inside. "You didn't ask who I was. You didn't charge more than what was fair. You didn't treat me like a transaction. That matters more than you know. Thank you for fixing more than just the car. K." Cal stared at the note for a long time. He should have been angry, or wary, or confused. But instead, he felt something rise in his chest, something quiet and bright, like hope with its eyes still closed. She had seen him too. Days passed. The little town slid back into its usual rhythm, slow and forgettable. Dust settled on the roads again. The diner served up the same greasy specials, and Cal went back to fixing cars like nothing had changed. But everything had. He kept the tools she sent him, though he didn't brag about them, didn't show them off to customers. They weren't trophies, they were reminders of her, yes, but also of the moment he'd done something right without knowing anyone was watching. That mattered. In a world full of angles and asks, he'd simply chosen honesty, and someone like Kate, Catherine Belmere no less, had seen it. Still, as each day blurred into the next, a part of him wondered if he'd ever see her again. Not the billionaire, not the headlines, just her. The woman with tired eyes and a laugh that had caught him off guard. And then, one Wednesday morning, she returned. No fanfare, no entourage, just the soft hum of that same old Mercedes pulling into his lot, dust curling behind her tires. She stepped out slowly, like she wasn't sure how welcome she'd be. Her coat was simpler this time, canvas, not cashmere, and her sunglasses were tucked into her collar instead of perched like armor on her face. Cal stepped out of the shop, wiping his hands on a rag. "Figured you were long gone," he said. "I was," Kate replied, "but I came back." He looked at her for a beat. "Car acting up again?" She shook her head. "No, I needed a quiet place." His eyes searched hers, waiting for a sign this was a game, but there was none. She looked tired again, but not guarded, just honest. "Then you picked the right place," he said finally. Kate exhaled, a bit of tension, leaving her shoulders. "I thought maybe you wouldn't want to see me again." "Not after everything," Cal shrugged. "You didn't lie to me, not really. I didn't tell you the truth either. You didn't owe it to me." That stopped her. She looked at him like she didn't quite understand how someone could live that way, without expectations or strings. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Can I sit for a while?" she asked. "You don't need permission." She smiled, barely, and followed him around the side of the shop where the two lawn chairs still sat in their quiet corner. One was a little more faded now, the sun bleaching it in uneven streaks, but the view of the sky was the same. They sat without speaking for a while, just listening to the birds, the hum of bees moving through the overgrown grass, the occasional clang of a truck on the highway a mile out. Cal finally broke the silence. "So what brought you back?" Kate hesitated. "A board meeting." He raised an eyebrow. "I was supposed to fly out yesterday," she said, "and I just didn't. Must have been a hell of a meeting." She let out a low, bitter laugh. "It always is. Suits fighting over numbers, market predictions, AI pipelines, legal landmines, all of it. And you're in charge of all that." Her expression hardened just a little. "I was, for a long time, but now, I don't know. I feel like I built a house I don't want to live in." Cal looked away, thinking. Funny how easy it is to get lost in something you built yourself. Kate turned toward him, surprised. "Yeah," she said softly. "Exactly." They sat in the quiet again, the weight between them softer this time. Not heavy, just present. "You know," Cal said after a moment, "most people wouldn't have come back. Most people aren't trying to figure out who they are without the world telling them. And have you?" Kate took a breath. I'm trying. That's why I'm here." Something about that made Cal smile. "Well, the town hasn't changed. Diners still got coffee that tastes like diesel, and the mechanics still got 2 good lawn chairs and a bad back." She laughed, warm and real. "That's exactly what I need." The sun shifted, casting their shadows longer across the grass. Cal reached into the small cooler he'd brought out earlier and handed her a bottle of soda, just like last time. She took it, fingers brushing his. "Thank you," she said. "For the soda? For not asking me to be anyone but who I am when I'm here." He looked at her then. Not the way you look at a stranger, or a name, or even a mystery. He looked at her like someone who understood that the world could be ugly and complicated and sharp, and still be full of small, honest moments that made it worth staying in. "You're welcome, Kate," he said. She leaned back in the chair and tilted, her head toward the sky. The silence between them wasn't awkward or strained anymore. It was comfortable. like two people who didn't need to fill every second with words because the moment itself said enough. And for the first time in a long time, Kate felt like she could breathe, really breathe. Not the shallow, calculated kind she'd perfected in press interviews and quarterly reports, but the kind that lived deep in your ribs. The kind you didn't know you were missing until you finally felt it again. She didn't know how long she'd stay, maybe just the day, maybe longer. But for now, here, in this forgotten corner of nowhere, sitting beside a man who had nothing to prove and everything to offer quietly, she felt something new. She felt free. The next morning, Kate was already there before Cal opened the garage. He pulled up in his old pickup, dust kicking up behind him, and spotted her Mercedes parked neatly out front, sunlight reflecting off the hood. She was sitting on the curb with a coffee in hand, bundled in a hoodie that didn't match her usual polish. She looked up as he stepped out and offered a small, sleepy smile. "You always get here this early?" she asked. Cal chuckled. "When things need fixing, yeah." She stood and dusted her hands off on her jeans. "Good, because I want to help." He paused mid-step. "Help? You mean with the cars?" She nodded, trying to look more confident than she felt. "I figure I've lived most of my life running companies. Might be nice to learn how to actually do something with my hands." Cal scratched the back of his neck, skeptical. "You ever even changed your own oil?" "No," she admitted. "But I'm a fast learner, and I'm not asking to get paid." He studied her a moment longer, then sighed. "All right, but if you drop an engine block on your foot, I'm not taking the blame." Her grin widened. "Deal." And just like that, something shifted again. Cal handed her a pair of gloves, too big for her hands, and rolled out a second tool tray. The morning sun crept across the concrete as they worked, him guiding, her fumbling but determined. She asked 100 questions, most of which made him smile. She listened closely when he explained torque specs and brake calipers. Like every bolt held a secret. By mid-morning, she had grease smudged across her cheek and a loose strand of hair stuck to her forehead. She looked ridiculous and radiant. Cal found himself glancing at her more than he needed to. "You know," she said as she tightened a lug nut, "this is weirdly satisfying." "Told you," he replied. "Machines don't lie. If something's wrong, you'll hear it, you'll feel it. You can fix it with the right tools." She leaned back, sighing. "People aren't like that." "Nope. People hide their squeaks." She looked over at him, eyes soft. "You ever think about leaving this place?" He didn't answer right away. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I wonder what I'd be leaving for. More noise? More concrete? I like knowing my neighbors. I like remembering what the stars look like." Kate was quiet for a moment. "I think I forgot." "What?" "How to want something simple. Everything I've ever done has been chasing something more, bigger, faster, louder. And now," she looked at her hands, still dirty from the wheel bolts, "now I just want to feel real again." They worked in silence for a while after that. Customers came and went. Cal handled the harder repairs, and Kate helped where she could, running for tools, wiping down parts, even organizing the chaotic drawer of washers and pins. At one point, a local teenager wandered in with a busted bike. Kate knelt down beside it, inspecting the bent rim, while Cal handled an oil change in the back. When she looked up, the kid was watching her like she was someone else, someone approachable, human. "You're really good at this," the boy said shyly. Kate blinked. "At fixing bikes? At not acting like you're better than me?" She smiled, surprised. "That's probably the nicest thing anyone said to me this year." He blushed and looked away. She watched him pedal off after they patched up his tire and felt something small but steady settle in her chest. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Worth. Not the kind tied to net worth or magazine covers or venture capital. The kind that came from being useful, from showing up. Later, as the sun dipped low and Cal closed the garage doors, Kate lingered by the workbench. I meant what I said earlier, she told him. Which part? That I don't want to go back. Cal leaned against the counter. You think you can stay hidden forever? I'm not hiding, I'm choosing. He studied her closely. And what happens when the world comes looking again? I don't know, she said. But I know I want to be someone they can't spin. Someone I'd actually like if I met her in the mirror. That's a good start. She looked down. I was scared to come back here, you know. Why? Because I thought you'd see me differently. I do, he said simply, but not in the way you're thinking. Kate met his gaze, something raw in her eyes. And how is that? Cal shrugged. Before, you were someone passing through. Now you're someone who stayed. The air between them thickened with something unsaid. Then he reached out and gently wiped the grease smear from her cheek with the edge of his thumb. You missed a spot, he said, voice low. She laughed, breathless. I'm not used to being messy. It looks good on you. They stood like that, the day fading quietly around them. There was no dramatic music, no camera flashes or security details, just two people who had somehow found each other in the most unlikely way. And in that moment, Kate realized something else. She didn't just want to escape her world. She wanted to build a new one, starting right here. The next few days became a rhythm, not quite routine, but something more honest than that. Cal would open the garage before sunrise, and Kate would roll in 30 minutes later, coffee in hand, wearing jeans that had seen better days, and a hoodie she'd borrowed from the corner rack inside the shop. No one questioned her. No one treated her like a billionaire or a CEO. Around here, she was just Kate, the woman who was learning how to bleed brakes and tell the difference between a flathead and a Phillips screwdriver. The town noticed, of course. You couldn't have someone like her floating around and not spark a few quiet whispers. Old Mr. Barton from the hardware store asked Cal if she was his niece. Cal just shrugged. Marie at the diner gave her an extra slice of pie one morning and didn't charge her. And when the mailman finally worked up the nerve to ask where she was from, Kate just said, out east, and left it at that. Nobody pushed. Because in towns like this, people understood unspoken boundaries. If someone wanted to be found, they'd say so. But what no one knew, what Kate hadn't said out loud yet, not even to herself, was that the rhythm she'd slipped into wasn't temporary. It wasn't a detour. Each day made it harder to imagine going back. Back to boardrooms, stock tickers, and security briefings. Back to being Catherine Belmere, the woman with everything and nothing at all. Instead, she was building something here. It started with the tools. Cal had let her organize the back room, something he hadn't done since he opened the place. She'd labeled drawers, created a system, even cataloged inventory on a clipboard. Cal teased her about it, but when a customer came in with a weird ignition problem and they found the exact coil in seconds, he gave her a look that said more than thanks. It continued with the conversations. At first, they talked shop, simple, things like gaskets and brake pads, but slowly, those talks turned into stories. Cal told her about his dad, a long-haul trucker who'd taught him to change oil at 8 years old. Kate shared pieces of her childhood, carefully at first, like someone testing the temperature of a pool with their toe. She talked about the pressure of being brilliant too young, of always being the youngest in the room and feeling like that wasn't good enough. She talked about her mother, how she smiled in interviews but cried behind locked doors. And she talked about her brother, Owen, the real heir, the one with the hunger and the ruthlessness. She didn't mention what he'd done, not yet, but Cal saw it in her eyes when she said his name, a flicker of hurt, of something broken that hadn't quite healed. Cal never pried, ever pried. But one night, after they closed up and were sitting on the hood of an old Civic watching stars blink into view, he said something that landed in her chest like a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. You don't have to bleed for people who wouldn't do the same for you. She didn't answer, just sat in silence, letting that truth echo against everything she'd ever believed about loyalty and legacy. The next morning, she didn't show up. Cal waited an hour before calling her. She didn't pick up, just a soft buzz of voicemail. He tried not to overthink it. Maybe she needed space. Maybe it had all been too much. But around noon, he saw her car pull up, slowly this time, like something was wrong. She stepped out, eyes red, no makeup, no attempt to cover it up. Her phone was in her hand, and she held it out like it burned. "He knows," she said. Cal didn't need to ask who. "My brother, Owen. Someone saw me here, took a photo." He called and said it's circulating in some of the investor channels already. Says I look like I've completely lost it. She laughed bitterly, a sound with no humor in it. "He wants me back in New York immediately. Says I've embarrassed the family. Says I'm done if I don't course correct by Monday." Cal leaned against the garage wall, watching her unravel. "And what do you want?" he asked. "I don't know," she whispered. "Yes, you do. You wouldn't be here if you didn't." She looked up at him, tears threatening again. "I want this. I want mornings with dirt under my nails and nights where I sleep without 4 glasses of wine. I want silence. I want people who see me, not just my net worth. But I can't just disappear. It doesn't work that way." Cal nodded slowly. "Then you've got a choice to make." Kate stared down at her hands. "If I stay, I lose everything I've built." He walked over and gently lifted her chin so she'd look him in the eyes. "Maybe, but maybe what you built wasn't meant to last." She swallowed hard. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So was I when I stayed here," he said. "Everyone else left, went to college, got out. I stayed because this place felt right in my bones, but some nights I thought I was the fool for holding on to it. And now," Cal smiled faintly, "now I get to sit under the stars with a woman who scares the hell out of billionaires. Doesn't seem so foolish anymore." She laughed through her tears. "You always know what to say." "I don't. I just say what I mean." Kate stepped closer, not quite touching, but close enough that he could feel the tremble in her voice. When she spoke again, "Can I stay? Just a little longer?" He didn't hesitate. "As long as you need." She exhaled, long, shaky, and full of a gratitude she couldn't find the words for. Because for the first time since she'd driven away from her empire, she realized that maybe staying didn't mean running. Maybe it meant returning to herself. And maybe, just maybe, this dusty little corner of nowhere was exactly where she needed to be found. Sunday arrived with the kind of heavy stillness that settles over a town before something breaks. The Zaish air hung dense, humid, and expectant, as if the whole world knew that Kate had a decision to make, and the weight of it clung to her skin like sweat. She didn't sleep much the night before. Cal had offered her the spare room in his tiny house, behind the shop. She took it, though she barely used the bed. Instead, she sat on the front porch watching the horizon shift from velvet blue to the ghost of sunrise. Her phone buzzed every hour. Missed calls. Owen, her assistant. 3 board members, 1 terse. Text from her legal team that just read, "You are in breach of your non-disclosure obligations." The irony was almost laughable. She wasn't trying to share anything. She was just existing. But in the world she came from, existence had terms and conditions. Cal poured her coffee without asking. "Want me to toss that thing in the river?" Kate smiled weakly, eyes still on her phone. Tempting. He sat beside her, elbows on his knees. "So, are you going back?" She didn't answer right away. The silence stretched. Birds chirped in a half-hearted way, like even they were waiting for her reply. "I want to," she said finally. "But I'm afraid I'll lose myself again." Cal stared out across the gravel road. "Then don't go back the same way," She turned to him, brow furrowed. What does that mean? It means you don't have to play their game by their rules. You built an empire, Kate. You can burn it down and build something better. She laughed, bitter again. It's not that simple. It never is. But that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Her fingers tightened around the coffee mug. There was fire under her skin again, but this time it didn't feel like pressure. It felt like purpose, like maybe her brother had done her a favor by backing her into a corner, because now there was only one way out, forward. By mid-morning, she had a plan. Not a perfect one, not even a finished one, but a beginning. She pulled out the old laptop she'd stuffed in her trunk, opened a blank document, and started typing. Cal watched from across the room, pretending not to watch. By lunchtime, she had a manifesto of sorts, not for the press, not even for her board. For herself, a line in the sand, a declaration of who she was when no one was looking. She'd spent years creating companies that were lean, powerful, and disconnected from the very people they claimed to serve. No more. If she went back, it would be to create something that started with people. Real people, towns like this, garages like Cal's, kids who didn't know how to dream bigger because no one had ever shown them what was possible. She would bring the future to the forgotten corners of the map. But first, she had to stand her ground. That afternoon, she changed into something cleaner, still plain, still humble. No designer logos, no branding, just her. She stood outside the shop, watching the clouds gather in the distance. There was a storm coming. She could feel it in her chest. Cal joined her, leaning in the doorway. You ready? I don't know. That's good. Means it's real. She turned to him, heart pounding. Will you hate me if I go? No, he said softly. But I'll miss you. And in that simple truth, she felt the full weight of her choice, because Cal didn't want anything from her. He never had. He didn't care about her power or her money or what she could do for him. He just liked her, the grease-smudged, unsure, rebuilding herself from the ground-up version of her. That kind of affection was rare, precious, and it made everything harder. I'm coming back, she said. I don't know when, but I will. Cal nodded. I'll keep the lights on. She smiled through the tightness in her throat. Then, impulsively, she leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't a grand, cinematic kiss. There was no orchestral swell, no perfect lighting, just lips meeting lips, soft, uncertain, real. When they pulled apart, neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. Kate got into her car as thunder rolled in the distance. She paused, with her hand on the door, then turned back one last time. Thank you, she said, for seeing me. And then she was gone, the Mercedes kicking up dust as she disappeared down the road, back toward the noise, the questions, and the storm that waited. But something was different now. This time, she wasn't driving away from something. She was driving toward it. Back in the garage, Cal stood for a long moment, staring at the empty spot where her car had been. The clouds above split open, a light rain beginning to fall. He didn't move. He just whispered, "Come back in one piece, Kate." Then he turned and went back inside. He had work to do. The city hit her like a cold slap to the face. Glass towers, screaming taxis, screens, on every surface pulsing with data and desire. Kate merged back into Manhattan life like a ghost walking through her old skin. Every street familiar, every sound slightly too loud. The building still bore her name, Billionaire Holdings. Her driver ID still opened the underground garage. Her security badge still lit up the turnstiles. But everything felt brittle, like a museum installation of a life she no longer believed in. The elevator rose in silence. She caught her reflection in the brushed steel walls, hair in a loose ponytail, jeans instead of her usual slate gray. Pantsuit, no makeup, no armor. The doors slid open to the top floor, and there he was, Owen, standing in her office, their office now, arms crossed, face carved from marble. Everything about him was sharp, the jawline, the suit, the eyes that said he'd been waiting and not patiently. "Nice of you to show up," he said, voice ice slick. Kate walked in without flinching. "You said Monday." "It's Monday," she set her laptop bag on the desk and didn't sit, didn't even look around. "I'm not here for your performance review, Owen." He raised an eyebrow. "That's funny, because I just got off the phone with half our investors. They're all wondering if your mental health has finally cracked." Kate said nothing. "You vanished. No contact. Then you show up in Nowheresville, changing oil and flirting with some backwoods mechanic." Still, she said nothing. Owen took a step closer, voice rising. "You think this is a joke? You think you can just play dress up and walk back in like nothing happened? You embarrassed us." Kate finally met his gaze, calm, steady. "No," she said, "I finally started telling the truth." He scoffed. "Spare me the therapy talk. Therapy talk. We've got $1 billion acquisition hanging in the balance. I need you on the call in 20 minutes. I'm not joining the call." Owen blinked, just once. Then, like a crack in glass, his composure began to splinter. "You're serious?" "I'm restructuring the board. I've drafted proposals. We're transitioning half of our capital into community-rooted startups, real ones, not the pretend social impact portfolios you parade in press releases." Owen laughed, cold and cutting. "You're insane." Kate opened her laptop, clicked through files without looking at him. "I already secured enough support from minority shareholders. They're in. The board will vote by Friday." "You've lost it," he hissed. "You'd tank this company to make yourself feel like a savior? I'd rather build something that matters than ride a golden elevator into moral oblivion." Silence stretched between them. When Owen finally spoke again, his voice was quieter, but darker. "You really think people like us get to walk away?" Kate paused, looked up. "No, I think we fight our way out, one step at a time." He stared at her, something unreadable flickering in his expression, almost like fear. "You won't win." "I already have," she said, "because for once, I'm not lying to myself." She left the office without waiting for his reply. By noon, the news had leaked. Billionaire Holdings was pivoting radically, billions being rerouted into overlooked communities, quiet towns, underfunded, schools, local businesses without fancy pitch decks. The markets wobbled. Analysts called it reckless. Some investors threatened to sue, but others applauded. And the phones started ringing. Requests, stories, partnerships, doors opening in places no one had bothered to knock before. Kate spent the next 3 days in a blur, meetings, press calls, policy rewrites. She barely slept, barely ate. But her heart beat with a rhythm she hadn't felt in years, not just adrenaline, conviction. And still, in every quiet moment, her mind drifted back to the garage, the smell of oil, the warm scrape of Cal's voice, the peace of waking up to silence and space. By Thursday night, she couldn't take it anymore. She dialed him. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey." Her throat tightened. "Hey." "You okay?" he asked. "No," she said softly, "but I'm doing the thing I need to do." "That's good." Silence again. Not awkward, just full. "I keep thinking about the stars," she said. "I see them every night," he replied. She swallowed. "I miss you." "I miss you too." There was a pause. Then, "When it's done," she said, "when the dust settles, and will you still be there?" "I'm not going anywhere." She smiled, closed her eyes, let herself believe it. They didn't need a promise. Not yet. Just the steady heartbeat of something real, waiting just beyond the noise. And for the first time in a long time, Kate Billionaire, once invisible inside her own empire, felt seen. The vote came down on a rainy Friday morning. Kate stood alone in the conference room, hands clasped behind her back, eyes on the rain sliding down the windows like silver threads unraveling from the sky. The board filed in slowly, each with their own weather, some stormy, others unreadable, one or two offering her a brief nod of cautious support. Owen arrived last. He didn't look at her, just took his seat, jaw locked tight, fingers drumming against the polished table like he was counting down to the explosion. The room settled. The attorney read the motion. To vote on Proposal 32B, reallocation of investment strategy in accordance with outlined community-centered initiatives and the restructuring of executive leadership authority to reflect said direction. A hand went up, then another. Kate didn't breathe. A third, a fourth. Owen didn't raise his, neither did two others. But it didn't matter. The tally was clear. The majority stood with her. It passed. Kate let out a quiet breath, her lungs filling for the first time in days. The attorney confirmed it, her voice level and neutral, as though this wasn't the first time an empire shifted on the axis of conviction. Owen stood. This is a mistake. Kate turned to him calmly. No, this is a beginning. He stared at her, face taut with something deeper than anger, something like betrayal, and maybe in a way it was. The Billionaire dynasty had been built on ruthless precision, on strategies that moved hearts like pawns and profits like clockwork, but she wasn't playing their game anymore. He left without another word. The others slowly filed out, some offering handshakes, some avoiding her gaze entirely. She let them go. She wasn't here to collect applause. She was here to change the blueprint. By late afternoon, she had stepped down as CEO. She wasn't walking away in shame. She was carving a new path, setting up a foundation independent from Billionaire Holdings, a launchpad for businesses in towns forgotten by venture capital, a bridge between potential and access. Real investments in real people. And it was already happening. Emails rolled in from across the country. A mechanic in Detroit with an invention that could revolutionize hybrid engines. A small-town farmer who'd created a water-saving system with nothing but scrap parts. A high schooler from Appalachia with a robotics team that had no funding but all the drive in the world. Kate read every message. She didn't delegate this part. She sat in her apartment, the same one she used to fill with wine and silence, and answered them herself, one by one, fingers flying across the keyboard, heart fuller than it had been in years. But even in the fullness, something ached. She missed the smell of old tires and wet gravel, missed the low hum of classic rock playing through a dusty speaker, missed Cal. On Sunday morning, she packed a bag. She didn't tell anyone, not her assistant, not the press. She just left. The road stretched before her like a lifeline, familiar, worn, honest. By late afternoon, she was pulling into the gravel lot, heart hammering, breath caught somewhere between fear and hope. The garage door was open. Cal stood under the hood of a Ford pickup, grease on his hands, sweat darkening the back of his shirt. The radio was playing something slow and sad, and the air smelled like rain on hot pavement. He looked up. Their eyes met. He didn't smile. Not yet. Just wiped his hands on a rag and walked over slowly. She stepped out of the car, feet crunching, on gravel, suddenly unsure of every word she'd practiced on the drive. But he beat her to it. "You came back. I told you I would." A pause. Then softer, "You okay?" She nodded. "Tired, but more myself than I've been in years." He tilted his head, taking her in. "You finished what you needed to?" "I did. You done running?" "I think so." He finally smiled. "Then welcome home." And just like that, the ache eased. She didn't need a parade, didn't need headlines or gold plaques on glass towers. She just needed this. One quiet voice saying, "You belong here." That night they sat under the stars again. No talk of markets or votes or legacy, just the occasional sip of beer, the hum of crickets, and the steady, grounding presence of someone who didn't care how much she'd once been worth. "I started a foundation," she said eventually. Cal raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? For people like you, places like this. Real, in things," he nodded once. "That sounds like you." They sat in the silence that followed, comfortable now, full of things not said. And in the stillness of that night, with the sky stretched wide above them and the world slowing down around the edges, Kate felt something she hadn't felt since she was a child on a swing set in a forgotten yard. Peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't come from winning, but from choosing the right things to fight for. The days that followed unfolded like chapters in a quieter book, one written not in bold headlines or quarterly gains, but in early mornings, honest work, and small, surprising joys. Kate woke with the sun now, sometimes before it. Her phone stayed mostly in the drawer, save for a few evening check-ins with her new foundation team, who quickly learned that business hours no longer meant late-night scrambles. If a call came in past 8, it could wait until tomorrow. Cal had offered her a key the day after she returned. No speech, just dropped it into her hand over morning coffee with a gruff, "In case you ever beat me here." She did, more often than not. The shop didn't change for her. It didn't soften its edges or hide its rust. It didn't pretend. And in that rawness, Kate found something that no polished boardroom had ever given her. Honesty. She swept floors, changed filters, learned how to use a torque wrench without bruising her knuckles. Customers gave her odd looks at first, especially when she struggled with a stubborn oil cap or mixed up lug nuts. But she never pulled rank, never once said who she was or what she used to be. They came to trust her, slowly. One old man with a bumper held on by duct tape tipped her a crumpled $5 bill for being patient with an old coot. A single. Mom thanked her for checking a strange noise without charging a dime. A teenage boy asked if she'd look over his engine sketch, just a dream on a notepad. But Kate saw something more. She remembered what Cal had said. Start with people. And now she did. The foundation began funding projects quietly. No red carpets, no press releases. A new hoist for a mechanic in Mississippi. A laptop lab for a high school on a reservation. A microloan to a black-owned garage in Baltimore with a dream to teach kids after school. Kids after school. Kate visited each one. Sometimes she flew, sometimes she drove, always with a notebook, not a camera crew. And every time she returned to Cal's place, it felt less like she was returning from the world and more like she was stitching her place into it. They didn't call it love, not yet. They didn't need to. It lived in the everyday things. In how Cal remembered how she liked her coffee, in how she remembered to pick up his favorite brand of motor oil, in the way their conversations drifted, comfortably from silence to warmth, without ever feeling forced. One night, after the garage was locked and the sky was bruising with stars, Cal handed her a box. "What's this?" she asked. He shrugged. "Something that belonged to my dad. Figured you should have it." Inside was a worn leather notebook, its corners softened by time. She opened it slowly. Inside were sketches, formulas, ideas, notes about combustion engines, fuel-to-air ratios, even diagrams for a hybrid model long before such things were mainstream. Kate looked up at him. He was brilliant. "Yeah," Cal said softly. "He just never had someone to bet on him." She traced a finger down one page, heart catching. "Maybe we can still get his ideas out there." Cal smiled, small and crooked. That'd mean a lot. They sat side by side, flipping through the book, talking in half sentences, letting the weight of the past soften under the light of a future they hadn't quite named yet. Then Kate paused. "Cal? Yeah? Do you ever think about what it would have been like if we'd met in the city?" He chuckled. "You mean if I'd walked into some high-rise in a flannel shirt, smelling like brake fluid?" She laughed. Exactly. You probably would have stepped over me on your way to the elevator. She smiled, but her voice softened. I don't know. I think I would have noticed you. Cal didn't answer right away. Then, I think we met exactly when we were supposed to, and she knew he was right, because sometimes the timing doesn't make sense on paper, but life isn't lived on paper. It's lived in those small, hard-won moments when two people find each other not because they're looking, but because they've finally stopped running from themselves. By fall, the garage was thriving. Not rich, not famous, but steady. And for the first time in years, so was she. There was no finish line to cross, no big reveal, just the day-to-day rhythm of something real, something true, something built not on image, but on integrity. The girl who once walked into that shop, with a broken car and a guarded heart, she was gone. In her place stood a woman who had nothing to prove and everything to give. The air shifted with the seasons. Summer's golden blaze mellowed into autumn's quieter hues. Rust red, amber, that soft yellow that makes the trees look like they're holding on to the last light of the year. Kate had never truly noticed the way leaves changed before. In the city, they'd been background decoration, something managed by parks departments and maintenance crews. But here they were honest, unapologetic in their aging, beautiful even in the letting go. It matched her rhythm. Each morning, she opened the garage with Cal, thermos in one hand, toolbox in the other. She wasn't the best mechanic, not yet, but she was learning fast. Cal taught her not just how to fix what was broken, but how to see what was wearing thin, listening for the early signs, knowing when something needed care before it fell apart. She applied it everywhere. When a customer came in with more than just a faulty carburetor, eyes tired, voice cracked from something heavier than car trouble, Kate noticed. She never pried, but she stayed kind, honest, present, word spread, not about who she really was. That secret stayed mostly intact, but people said things like, she listens, or she doesn't talk down to you, or she gets it. That was enough. One Saturday afternoon, a little girl came in with her dad. She was maybe 7, wild curls tied back with a greasy ribbon, clutching a homemade flyer. My teacher said we're supposed to interview someone who does important work, she said, holding out the paper. And I picked you, Kate blinked. Me? Yeah, the girl said simply. You fix stuff. Her dad laughed awkwardly, about to redirect her, but Kate knelt down to the girl's height, heart catching. I'd be honored, she said. The questions were scribbled in crayon. What do you do? Why do you like it? What's something you fixed that made you proud? Kate answered all of them slowly, carefully. When she got to the last question, she paused. What had she fixed? 100 cars, a dozen fuel lines, 1,000 small things. But really, she'd fixed herself, bit by bit, gear by gear. Later that week, the little girl came back with a drawing, Kate standing next to a car with a cape fluttering behind her. I made you a superhero, she said proudly. Kate held the picture in her hands like it was $1 million check. Thank you, she whispered. She hung it in the garage's front window. That night, as the shop closed and the autumn sky turned soft and indigo, Kate sat with Cal on the back steps. 2 beers between them, a blanket pulled over their legs, to fight the first bite of October chill. He glanced at her, the corner of his mouth twitching. You ever think you'd end up here? She looked out across the field, the horizon stitched in gold. Not in 1,000,000 years, she said, but now I can't imagine being anywhere else. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you make this place better, you know. Kate turned to him. So do you. He shook his head. No, I mean it. You came in here with a busted engine and 1,000 secrets, and instead of hiding behind used-to-bes and could-have-beens, you showed up. For this town. For these people. For me. Her breath caught. The moment was small, quiet, but it held weight, like truth. She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. He didn't flinch, just held on. "You gave me a second, a chance," she said softly. "I think you gave yourself that." He leaned in, brushed a kiss to her temple, then rested his forehead against hers. There were no declarations, no need. Sometimes the loudest kind of love is the one that simply stays. The next morning, Kate woke to an early frost on the window pane and Cal cooking eggs in the kitchen. The radio played low. The scent of coffee drifted through the house. She stepped into the light and smiled. This was her life now. And though the rest of the world still knew her as the heiress of Billionaire Holdings, out here, in oil-stained boots and a borrowed hoodie, she was something richer. She was real. She was rooted. And she was ready for whatever came next. The call came on a windswept Tuesday. Kate was under a '98 Civic, cursing a seized Bolt, when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She let it go the first time, and the second. It wasn't until the third ring that she sighed, rolled out from under the car, and answered with one greasy hand. Kate Billionaire? She hadn't heard her last name spoken like that in months. "Yes? This is Monica Levins, executive producer of Profiled." Kate blinked, wiped her hands on a towel. The voice was crisp, practiced, one used to being in control of conversations. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Kate laughed, softly, glancing at the dirt on her jeans. "Depends on how you feel about axle grease." Monica didn't miss a beat. "We've been following your foundation's quiet rise. The stories coming out of those projects, they're remarkable. We'd love to do a feature. Not just the philanthropy, the full arc." From boardroom to body shop, Kate went still. There it was, the inevitable spotlight she'd managed to dodge for almost a year. "You've turned down every interview," Monica added gently. "But this could help the people you're trying to uplift, show what's possible." Kate didn't answer right away. Her eyes drifted to the window. Cal was in the lot, talking with a customer, laughing about something. The late afternoon light made his hair look like sun-warmed copper. "Send me the details," she said finally. That night, she told Cal. He didn't flinch, didn't bristle, just nodded slowly. "You sure you want that back in your life?" "I'm not going back," she said. "I'm showing them where I went." The filming was quiet, respectful. Monica's team came without fanfare, just a couple of cameras and a sound guy who fell in love with the diner's peach cobbler. They spent a week shadowing her, watching her work, listening to her talk to customers, following her on a visit to a small-town tech incubator her foundation had funded. One moment stood out. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't planned. They were filming a garage scene when a woman came in with a stalling engine and 2 kids in tow. Kate helped her in, gave the kids coloring books, fixed the loose wire in 10 minutes and refused payment. When Monica asked later why she hadn't charged, Kate shrugged. She needed help. That was enough. The producer nodded, clearly moved. The episode aired 3 weeks later. Kate didn't watch it live. She and Cal were on the roof that night, wrapped in blankets, watching stars instead of screens. But the world watched. And the world reacted, not with mockery, not with scandal, but with awe. The story of the billionaire who walked away, who rolled up her sleeves and used her name to build bridges instead of walls, it resonated. News outlets picked it up. Schools taught it. Strangers wrote letters, and donations poured into the foundation, not millions from corporations, but $20 from a welder in Ohio, $50 from a grandmother in Arizona, a handwritten note from a kid in foster care. "I want to be like you." Kate cried quietly the night she read that one. Cal held her for a long time. The fame didn't change her. She still opened the garage every morning, still got grease on her hands, still swept the floors at closing. She spoke at a few conferences, but she always came back home. To the hum of the lift, the hiss of tires, the smell of hot metal and old coffee. One evening, as they closed up shop, Cal turned to her with a slow smile. You ever think about teaching? Kate raised an eyebrow. Teaching what? All of it, mechanics, money, life, she laughed. I barely have it figured out myself. That's why you'd be good at it, he said simply. You wouldn't lie to him? It stuck with her, and 3 months. Later, in a drafty community center, Kate stood in front of 15 wide-eyed teenagers and said, I'm not here to teach you how to be rich. I'm here to teach you how to be ready for the world, for your own ideas, for your own power. They listened, because she wasn't a guest speaker in a blazer. She was the woman who showed up in coveralls, smelling like engine oil and fresh purpose. And when she handed them toolkits at the end of the program, engraved with their names and the words, "Build what matters," some of them cried. So did she. She wasn't fixing cars anymore. She was building futures, one wrench, one word, one kid at a time. The first snow came quietly. It dusted the world in white while Kate and Cal were asleep, the morning sun casting long shadows across rooftops and tire tracks. She opened the door to the shop and smiled at the way the frost clung to the windows, like the earth had been wrapped in its softest blanket. It was the kind of morning that made you speak in whispers, as if too much. Sound might wake up the sky. Inside the garage, it was warm. The heat kicked on with a familiar rattle, and Cal handed her a mug of coffee without a word. The rhythm of their lives had settled into something gentle now. It wasn't without its bumps. There were bills, repairs, the occasional customer who didn't pay on time. But even the rough days didn't shake her anymore. Not like they used to. Her old world had been built on glass, perfect, shiny and fragile. This one was built on steel. It could take a few dents. That afternoon she got a message, short, simple, turn on channel 6. She did, wiping her hands on a rag as the TV blinked to life. The camera focused on a hospital in rural Texas. A nurse explained that they'd just received a donation, a full suite of diagnostic tools, mobile telehealth gear, and a permanent fund to cover care for uninsured patients. The camera panned to the donor plaque on the wall. The Calton Initiative. Kate smiled softly. She hadn't asked for her name to be on it. She never did. But Monica's voiceover explained, sometimes the biggest change begins with someone who simply listens, someone who shows up, someone who fixes what's broken, not for applause, but because it's the right thing to do. And suddenly, there it was, a photo of the shop, a brief shot of Kate laughing in the bay, grease on her cheek, Cal handing her a wrench, the two of them quietly being. Her phone buzzed again. An old colleague, a journalist, a stranger who just wanted to say thank you. Kate silenced it. She stepped outside. Snow was still falling. Soft, slow, like time had loosened its grip. Across the lot, Cal was fitting chains on an old truck's tires for a neighbor. She walked over, kissed him lightly on the cheek. "You're famous," he teased. She grinned. Nah, just helpful. And that was the truth. The world still knew her as Kate Bellmere. But here she was just Kate, the woman who stayed, the woman who fixed things, the woman who'd stopped running and started reaching. They didn't need to define what they were. They didn't have plans carved in stone. But one night, as snow whispered against the roof and the fire crackled low, Cal took her hand and said, "I was thinking about putting in an extra bay next year." Yeah. Maybe even a lift. And I don't know, a classroom maybe, somewhere kids could come after school. Kate didn't answer right away. She just squeezed his hand. And in that squeeze was everything, yes, to the bay, to the classroom, to the life they were still quietly building. Because she hadn't just rebuilt herself. She'd found a place where her heart could finally idle. Not always racing, not stuck in neutral, but humming steady. That night, as the town settled into winter silence and stars blinked awake over frozen rooftops, Kate stood at the window and thought about all the places she'd been. The penthouse views, the private jets, the endless meetings. And then she looked at the snow-covered shop, the faded sign, the soft yellow porch light Cal always left on for her. She wouldn't trade it for the world. Not now, not ever. And so, under a quiet snowfall in a town the world barely noticed, a story that could have been about wealth, betrayal, or power became something else entirely. It became a story about returning to yourself, not in some grand cinematic arc, but slowly, tenderly, like tuning a forgotten radio and finding your favorite station still playing. Kate didn't conquer her past. She didn't erase it. She honored it by choosing something better. Each day she woke up and decided to show up, to the garage, to the kids, to Cal, and most of all, to herself. It's easy to believe that second chances come wrapped in epiphanies or applause, but often they come disguised as hard work, early mornings, and small, stubborn acts of honesty. Kate found her freedom not by hiding who she was, but by building who she wanted to be. And maybe that's something we all carry. That quiet hope that maybe we're not too late to start again. That maybe the person we're becoming is worth the long, winding detour. So if tonight feels heavy, if the engine's stalled or the road's unclear, remember her. The billionaire who walked away, the woman who stayed, and the truth that saved her. You don't need to be powerful to matter. You just need to be present, and kind, and real. So wherever you are, whatever time it is, take one deep breath. Then another. Let it settle in your chest like calm after a storm. You're allowed to rebuild. You're allowed to begin again. And someone out there, maybe closer than you think, might just be waiting for you to show up. Gently, honestly, completely. You